Thank you all for coming. My name is Bobby Lau. I am the Senior General Manager for Ward Village and Howard Hughes Corporation. I'm here in my capacity as President for the Kakaako Improvement Association. Thank you very much. God blessed us with good weather, so the attendance is obviously part of that. I want to quickly introduce my board members. We dedicate time to helping making this organization successful. So I'm just going to go real quickly through their names. If you can hold your applause till I'm done. I have our Vice President Steve Sullivan here. If you would stand. Miyuki is also here. Almario. Allison Lee, I saw her walk in. Marquita is here. Bob Oda is also here. And Sherry Ann Higa. And I wanted to introduce that gentleman that's sitting at the entry. That's Peterson Rosario. So those of you who have been involved with KIA always see Peterson running around rescuing either speakers or the MC like he just did for me. He's joined us as our newest board member. So if you wouldn't mind, just a round of applause for all our board members. And of course, the lady that keeps us all organized and makes sure that we have lunch here for all of us, Sherry Goya, our Executive Director. Okay, real quickly on housekeeping, parking validations, there's a stamp up front. If this is your first time here, restrooms are right around the corner. And lastly, on your way out, there are some free literature from members of the Kakaako Improvement Association on the table back there. Please stop by, grab a card, grab a flyer. Special thanks to Tom Sorensen, owner of the Design Center, for making this room available to us and always helping us in supporting our group. All right, those of you who haven't, I will challenge you to schedule and register to attend our blind tasting. The blind tasting is scheduled here on 9/9 at 5:30 p.m. If you pay by Monday, it's a cost of $99. So again, September 9/9 for $99 by Monday. Please come. It's a few hours of trying different wines and seeing how well your palate knows wine. And Mr. Carr, if you come, I'll make sure there's 2 extra cases. Also, our networking events are always fun. We get to meet each other and learn a little bit about what we do. At the last event, I know a colleague of mine attended and we both met some new people and we actually started relationships with them, and so it was very successful for us. It's kind of far out, but October 28th here, 11:30, it is a brown bag, so we hope you will attend as well. Okay, we have 3 dynamic speakers here today. How we're going to go through the program is I'm going to introduce each of them before they speak. So I'm going to start with Stanford Carr. After he speaks, Lindsay Doy will be up, and then last but not least, Mr. John Reed. So I'm going to start with Stanford. Stanford's been around for a while, and so he is a good friend and a colleague of my boss, David Strife. So I had told David that I was coming to speak today, or to introduce him today, and David had a special bio that I was supposed to use. And I decided that the crowd, it was only noon, it wasn't 5 o'clock, we didn't all have beer in our hands, so I'm going to stick with the bio that was provided to me. So Stanford Carr is president of Stanford Carr Development, where he oversees an extensive portfolio of projects ranging from master plan communities to resort-style living and affordable housing. As a locally and nationally recognized leader in business, Stanford is known for building communities on a foundation of family living, the spirit of the islands, and respect for the land. Born and raised on Maui, Stanford is actively involved in the community. He serves as trustee for the University of Hawaii Foundation, chapter chair for March of Dimes Hawaii, and board member for the Rehabilitation Hospital of Pacific Foundation. He's also with the Honolulu Hawaii Council on Economic Education, American Red Cross, and Trust for Public Land. Without further ado, Mr. Stanford Carr.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you all for having me here this afternoon. Anything for free lunch, so I got to earn my lunch now and speak about what's going on. So when Sherry emailed me and says, would you speak at our lunch? And I said, well, what would you like me to speak about? And she said, well, how about past, present, and future? So let me start off with Holly Cahuilla Place, a 204-unit rental project that we broke ground on December 19th of 2012. It was the first high-rise to come up in Kakaako during this cycle. And then we did this project in collaboration with HHFDC. We have Craig Uri here, Executive Director of that agency, and the HCDA, our Chair, and Lindsay Doy, John Whelan, Chair of the board, and Lindsay Doy, Edward Las Palmas from Hawaii Community Development Authority. So we completed Holly Cahuilla Place in April of 2014 and completely leased up to all 204 units by September. This is an income-restricted rental community, meaning families cannot earn more than 60% of the area median income. I like to say that 100% of our tenants represent 80% of the workforce. We've got school teachers, county employees, state employees, visitor industry, even some small business owners. This is a shot along Holly Cahuilla Street. You'll see that the diamond head end of the parking structure were lined with 5 townhouses that front of the Waldron Park. Kakaako Wine and Loft and Sake store just opened along Holly Cahuilla. They've got a great selection of wines as well as sakes. Please stop in there and patronize the place. This is a shot of the corner of Keawe and Holly Cahuilla, and we're now got Up Road Cafe. It's owned by a Japan couple. They work really hard, very successful. In fact, they've just brought in some friends from Japan to assist them so that they can expand their hours. Right now they're open from about 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and they're going to start opening up earlier as well as in the evenings. A shot of our lobby, entry lobby there, our recreation and community room with some flex furniture. Another shot of it there, our ground floor elevator lobby. This is a shot of, aerial shot here of Mother Waldron Park. We were able to bring this project in under budget and ahead of schedule. So we felt, why not reinvest in the community? So we worked with HCDA, the City and County of Honolulu, and Department of Land and Natural Resources, because Mother Waldron Park is a historical park, in order to clear the regulatory issues with respect to doing a renovation. If you recall, there was a pretty rundown one basketball court and a volleyball court. We saw that there was a real demand for the use of the basketball court, so we reconfigured the design and built 2 new basketball courts, completely redid the irrigation and soil amendments and turf. And it enabled us to reinvest in the community. Since doing this, our residents at Holly Cahuilla and the neighboring senior rentals have adopted the park. Every last Saturday of the month, they have a community work day to clean the park. So the community has taken ownership. They also, in our recreation community room, have a once-a-month meeting with police officers for the community watch program. So they've really taken ownership of the neighborhood and really proud of the stewardship that's going on there. All of the shrubbery that you'll see along the walls, the city was opposed to anything other than turf because of maintenance. So we at Holly Cahuilla have adopted that as and maintain all of the accent shrubbery. I just wanted to feature our 5th floor rooftop here, where we have 950 panels of PV that we manufacture between 800 to 1,000 kilowatt hours per day. That equates to about $8,000 to $10,000 a month savings on electricity. And up on the rooftop, people always wondered what was the unusual configuration of the wave that we have at the top of the building to top it off. Well, that's part of our manufacturing plant. You'll see that the Makai half of the rooftop is covered with solar panels, and we manufacture hot water there. And all of the hot water is stored in tanks under the roof of the mechanical room. So our residents here save a considerable amount of money because there's no water heaters. Not have to worry about any flooding in the future, and also mitigate their electricity rates. and it's going green. This is something we're rolling out in 2 weeks. We were required by an RFP to set aside an office space with a unisex bathroom and a utility area for the police department. Originally, there was once a trailer that was situated on this site, so part of the RFP was to replace that office space for the police department. So we programmed this space on the ground floor. Come to find out though, the police department didn't have any need for the space, so it was, what can we do with it? Well, I got inspired by some of the work that we've done with parents and children together. Once a year I fulfill my bucket of selling newspapers along the corner of Bishop and King Street in the morning for Kids Day. But they have a program up at KPT called A Bakery, and they actually work there with the residents for vocational training. I've also been exposed to the Sullivan Innovation Center at the school, where they have incredible hardware, software, and equipment to really take these kids to the next level and think three-dimensionally. So I felt this being a low-income rental project and some of our kids being underserved, why not bring this type of innovation and technology into our community? So we're rolling out in 2 weeks the Creation Corner at Hollywood Village for the youth of our village to start off with as a pilot program. We collaborated with Debbie from Manoa Innovation Center and have worked with the curriculum of Yohan School to roll out. Here you see 6 computers, 3D printers, and we also have a laser router that's being installed now. And Debbie has developed a curriculum to bracket our kids, our youth, from 5 years old to 7 years old, as well as older kids by curriculum and age, in order to promote them to think three-dimensionally and why reading comprehension and math skills are so important. So we're pretty excited about this. There's a photo there of a 3D printer. So we're pretty excited about this. All right, so that's the past, and so there's 2 more tenants that will be rolling into the commercial space, a hair salon and a convenience store. So that'll be a nice added amenity to the neighborhood. Ke'o Place in Ke'o Lane, known as Block A by Kamehameha Schools. Robert Oda here from Michigan State Kamehameha Schools. They approached us 3 years ago to master plan this whole city block. This is designated for the civic station along Alekawila Street here. So the first 50 feet of this block will be for the transit station. The Makai section of the transit for people to embark on going Diamond Head, and the Mauka along the Circle lot for people who are going out to West Oahu, or even maybe a UH2. So the challenge was, here's this whole city block, and we've been anticipating rail as it is under construction. Well, let's do a project that defines transit-oriented development. Let's do a mixed-use neighborhood, since we do have a transit station. That's not just for home ownership. Let's build some rental apartments. Let's build some neighborhood retail to serve the greater community, because you now have the body and critical mass in Kakaako that it warrants providing some walkable retail amenities so that people can just walk to a convenience store, grocery store, restaurants, and shop. So we designed Ke'o Place. Ke'o Place is really the residential condominium component. And Ke'o Lane is the retail promenade where KS and their partner will retain the ownership of 40,000 feet of ground floor retail and 209 rental apartments, 5 levels above the ground floor retail. You're probably wondering why Ke'o? Ke'o is on the Big Island, south of Kona. Well, there was once a lane that bifurcated this block called Ke'o Lane. Ke'o translates to transformation. What more appropriate name, what Kakaako is going through today, which is a retransformation back to a vibrant mixed-use residential community as it was at the turn of the century. It's slowly evolved into a commercial light industrial area as suburbs were developed on the outskirts of Honolulu. So in approaching this development, we reached out to HART, and we worked with them. They basically threw out the designs of what they had planned for this site and allowed us to have design charrettes to completely integrate the transit station into the project. Originally, the station was going to cannibalize the corner of South Street and Halikaʻuila, but we encouraged them and we commissioned renderings to illustrate how the feel of, and I didn't put this up today, but how the transit station should feel. You know, you're going to have a guideway coming along Halikaʻuila Street. It's going to be quite intimidating. So let's orient and internalize everything towards the actual project and the promenade. So we set back, we call it the Wuna. You'd be familiar with 4th Street Mall, or if you've ever been to 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. We've got a 24-foot lane here that'll service the retail for early mornings for deliveries. And then the bollards go up. This becomes purely a pedestrian access along the transit station and down the Keho Lane Retail Promenade. The parking stalls along this border, when rail comes into operations, will be converted to ground floor commercial retail, so they can serve patrons of the transit station. Halikaʻuila will turn into a one-way street, diamond head only, and a bikeway, dedicated biking. South Street will, as it is today between Alamoana and Pohukaina, is a bi-directional two-way. Well, with our development in the future, South Street will become bi-directional all the way up to Main Street. You know, we improve the circulation, give drivers more options to circulate through the neighborhood. So along Keawe Street, we have a wide boardwalk with building setbacks, so if cafes were to become tenants here, they can spill out to the sidewalks. Keho Lane Promenade, Retail Promenade, and you see this is the front door of our lobby to the high-rise. So if you live there, you'd be home now. Along Pohukaina Street, we lined the parking structure, and this is a 1,030 stall parking structure, of which 280 stalls are to serve the MS School's retail as well as rental apartments. So there's 5 levels of rental apartments above this ground floor retail. Along the Pohukaina and South Street edge, we have 35 townhouses of 4 stories that lines the Makai and Eva end of the parking structure, so that when you look and walk around the entire block, you're looking at architecture and with 35-foot front yard setbacks along South Street. You're really advocating for a walkable, humanistic scale within the neighborhood. We've got wide 15-foot pedestrian pathways flanked by double-lined canopy trees. And rising from the middle of the block is a 388-unit, 43-story, 400-foot tower. So you really have to take a few steps back down the block to really recognize the high-rise as opposed to having a 400-foot tower adjacent to the sidewalk. So this is a rendering of a corner from Pohukaina and Keawe. Again, ground floor retail, 5 levels of residential apartments, and then you see the tower rising out of the middle of the block. You'll notice some architectural motifs. If you haven't been there yet, please go to Building 3, Restaurant Row. On the Eva end, we have our sales gallery there called Keho Place. We've got interactive touchscreen monitors that you can see all the features of the community. The elevator core rising up the building has interpretations of celebrating the history and heritage of this area, starting from the top, Huahiwi, which represents the Ko'olau Mountains, Loi Kalo, the Kalo Leafs, for the Kalo Loi ponds and what's existed further inland. Ililele, which represents the jumping strips of trails that people used to traverse the neighborhood when there were salt ponds, fish ponds, as well as Loi Kalos. Pa'akaya, which represents the salt that was made in this district, and Kai, which is the ocean. Little rendering here along Pohukaina Street. You see the rental apartments off towards the Diamond Inn end of the block. And again, more townhouses. This is looking at it from Pohukaina, South Street. You'll see our 8th-floor recreation deck there. And again, 4 levels of townhouses along South Street. This is where right now, with respect to Ke'o Place, we're doing loan docs right now. We hope to have that wrapped up within 3 weeks to record the mortgage and then break ground. But we've already given notice to proceed with respect to long lead items, such as glazing. What's coming in the future? We just submitted our tax credit application. We just published our environmental assessment with no further action necessary with respect to an EA. This is a 128-unit family rental project along the corner of Kona Street and Pihoi. It'll consist of 1, 2, 3-bedroom family units, 27 one-bedrooms, 72 two-bedroom units, and 29 three-bedroom units. Unlike Halikuwila, we're providing no studios in this project. What we realize is there's a big need for families. We had over 1,000 people sign up for Halikuwila for only 204 units, and we get inquiries daily about the opportunity to rent. So, having heard that and experiencing that, we wanted to design and build another complex that will be more family-oriented. We hope to break ground on this project in a year. If you don't know exactly where it is, it's right there along proximity of Pihoi and Kona Street, just off of Hawaii Tower. That's it. I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much for having me.
Our next speaker is Lindsay Doi. Lindsay Doi is currently the Acting Asset Manager and Compliance Assurance and Community Outreach Officer for the Hawaii Community Development Authority. The HCDA is charged with planning and implementing community development programs for areas designated as community development districts by the state legislature. Currently, the HCDA administers zoning rules established for Kakaako, Kalailoa, and He'ia community development districts. Lindsay has been with HCDA since 2013 and oversees all agency communications, media relations, and procurement. Prior to joining the state, Lindsay spent over 6 years working in the TV news industry. She worked as a reporter in California and Oregon before returning home to Hawaii as the evening news producer for KITV. Please help me welcome Lindsay Doi.
Bobby, and thanks for having me. I'm Lindsay Doi, as she mentioned, and I'm just going to be giving a brief overview of HCDA goings on. For more details, I do have a newsletter in the back, so feel free to pick it up, sign up. I do it monthly via email. I also have a lot of the numbers you'll soon be seeing all back there, so don't feel like you need to write down or keep up. I'm going to go a little fast. Okay. So this is just an overview of the district. For those who aren't aware, the HCDA has jurisdiction over all of Kakaako, so that's bounded in the red. We do have a number of projects, as I'm sure you're all aware, now under construction. This is slightly outdated, so we do have a few more that are under construction, and some just recently finished construction, like 801 South Building A, which actually now has residents living in it. But it gives you an idea of how spread out the new developments are throughout the district. So here's some of those numbers I was talking about. This represents the newly completed developments since 2012, so the new round of economic housing development in the district. So we do have about 1,600 units that were produced in the past few years. As I note on the bottom, 58% of those units were designated for qualified income families. So that means reserved housing, or what we sometimes call affordable housing. It targets families making under 140% of the area median income, or AMI. So here's the ones that are now under construction. You see Symphony, Waiea, The Collection, Anaha, 801 South Street B. These are all in the ground right now. We have a total of 1,700 units coming up. A number of those, again, are reserved housing, so they're for qualified income families. You see 23% of those units, or about 400 of those units, are for those qualified income groups. And these are the ones that the HCDA recently permitted, so you'll be seeing them come up under construction very soon. We do have a number as part of both the KS and Howard Hughes master plans. Those should be coming up soon. So you'll see this actually adds up to a lot more units, about 2,400 units that haven't yet been built. So that's kind of a big number in terms of what you'll be seeing in the near future. So expect more construction cranes and all of that to continue. This gives you an idea, though, of the other end of the spectrum. So not market rate housing, but state subsidized low-income housing. So a lot of the talk recently has been centered upon building more what people call affordable housing, but I think what they really mean is low-income housing for folks making under 60% of the area median income. So that's really difficult for developers to build without the state subsidy or the government financing. So we see, since the HCDA was created in 1976, we approved about 1,200 units of this low-income state-subsidized housing. Stanford talked about Palikavila Place, which was just finished last year. So this gives you that big overview, all the totals. You see, after this round of construction, we'll have just over 11,000 units in the district. The current housing cycle since 2012 will actually double the amount of housing units that are in the district. So what we had before in the 80s and the 90s to what we'll have in the next few years, you're looking at a doubling of the number of housing units. And again, a number of those per HCDA rules need to be reserved for qualified income families. So of that number, you'll have 34% of those reserved for qualified income families. So another issue I wanted to talk about today, aside from all the development that you see going on in the district, is the other face, which is homelessness. We've been attending a lot of meetings, a lot of focus groups to see what we can do to be a part of the solution and really address the growing population in Kakaako, Makai. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this site down on Olomehani Street, Koula, Lalo Street. There's a lot of trash, a lot of encampments. Folks have been building structures, you name it, it's out there. And even though we did station a dumpster in the area at HCDA's own cost to empty it daily, we still do see a lot of this trash and activity. So we do understand there needs to be something that's done. We need to be part of the solution. But given that we're one agency, we can't go at it alone. So we are working with a number of government, nonprofit, everyone who's willing to help. We're working together. So we're trying to coordinate those efforts, get an action plan. The governor just announced a leadership team, so we've been working closely with them. I just want to point out, Tony likes to call it a carrot and stick approach. So this is actually what we've been doing to kind of incentivize folks to get off the streets, and then the sticks, which is what we kind of use to clamp down on homelessness. So HCDA does have a jobs training program that we fund. It employs homeless residents from the Next Step shelter, and they go about doing janitorial services or beautification services at our parks. So this is something that HCDA would normally have to pay for anyway, but we figured kill two birds with one stone, have a jobs training program to give homeless individuals job skills and some money to do a service that we need. So we do have that. We also, as part of that program, have a security deposit match program, which helps get them into rental housing. It helps get them in the door, since that's sometimes a barrier. And we also have a laundry and shower program, which is operated during the day at Next Step Shelter, since that shelter does shut down normally during the day. We have staffed it so that we actually can offer those services through that. Some of the sticks, we do have park rules that prohibit camping in the park. We are working to be better at enforcing our trespassing rules for people who go into the park when the park is closed, or for people who do camp in the park. And as part of the jobs training program, we're doing regular outreach with the folks on the street so that they're aware of all of these programs and they're aware of the services out there to help them. Some other things that are coming up potentially in the future, we're looking at fences. I know a lot of the landowners in the Kakaako area have already put up some fences to prevent some problems by their properties. So we're looking at that. We're also waiting on the city to establish their presence in our Look Lab facility. This city group is the one who enforces all the stored property sidewalk ordinances. So their presence in the district, we're hoping will further deter such encampments literally right outside of their doorsteps. So like I mentioned, the governor recently formed his leadership team on homelessness. They found about 300 people living in the streets of Kakaako, of which 30 were families. So they made it their priority to get these families housed. A lot of children are running through the streets, so that becomes a really scary a safety situation. So we, as HCDA, offered our maintenance shed, which is located in Kakaako, as a potential solution. It's about 5,000 square feet, and if you're not familiar where it is, it's kind of between the waterfront park and JABSA. It's this small maintenance shed. It's kind of tucked in between near the big parking lot. So right now, the governor's team, as well as DAGs and other government agencies, are really looking at this site to see what needs to be done and how fast it can be done to convert this into a temporary emergency shelter for families. These are just some of the other programs that we would support. We are looking at building potentially bike paths or more pedestrian-friendly facilities through Kakaako. We very much support the complete streets element, which is very pedestrian-friendly landscape, just a nice environment for people to walk around or use multimodal transportation. We also support the city's plans for expanded bike paths or pedestrian trails, and this is, I think, one of their maps that shows the whole network of proposed bike paths. So hopefully we can have some that go through the Kakaako area as well as the Mauka area to better connect all of these roads and to better foster transit-oriented development. So that's the brief rundown. Again, I have handouts in the back, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me or sign up on the newsletter. All my information is back.
Thanks, Lindsay. I think very brave to approach the homeless topic, so we appreciate the update. Last but not least is Mr. John Whalen. John Whalen is an urban and regional planner whose professional career extends more than 4 decades in both government and private practice. Prior to founding the Honolulu-based consulting firm Plan Pacific, Mr. Whalen served as Director of Land Utilization for the City of Honolulu. Now semi-retired from his consulting practice, he's been serving since April 2015 as Chair of the Hawaii Community Development Authority. He is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and was elected to the College of Fellows in 2006. Mr. Whalen holds his master's degree in urban planning from the Columbia University School of Architecture. Mr. Whalen.
Aloha. I'm just one of an entirely new board at HCDA, which might be a scary prospect to some people, but we didn't actually know each other on the board either. So in part we're getting acquainted with each other, and I'd say that actually I'm very impressed with the other members of the board. I think they bring a lot of different skills and perspectives to the board. We seem to work well together. I know Steve Scott sitting over there in the corner. We can't talk because the sun's shining off. or now I guess there's just two of us, so we can't then acknowledge each other. But because we were a new board, we actually, as our first step in April, formed an investigative committee to set some priorities for the board. It was a hard way to kind of get to know each other and where each of us were coming from. These were the issues that we identified more or less in priority, starting with affordable housing. That's a broad term, includes our reserved housing and workforce housing and other aspects, anything that is within reach of people who are seeking housing. Another, of course, is the homeless encampment that Lindsay had mentioned. That's hard to ignore. Parks and shoreline, and that includes Kewalo Basin as well as the Kakaako Waterfront Park. Protecting industrial services and small businesses. Kakaako isn't only about changing things, it's also to help foster what is contributing and useful about the district already. It is an area of existing neighborhoods and activities, economic activity. The TOD overlay. People have heard a lot about TOD recently, so I don't have to describe what it is, but HCDA has an environmental impact statement that is, I think, at the point of final acceptance. I don't know if we have accepted it yet, but it's almost there. And following that would be a look at our regulations to see what overlay regulations will apply to the Kakaako district. And then finally, what I would call just HCDA operations, looking forward for the district as well. Starting with affordable housing, HCDA is not a housing development or financing agency per se, but we can contribute in some way to the affordable housing demand by making exactions on new development for form of reserve housing, partner with others, and to including nonprofit organizations and other state agencies, and to leverage public land. So here are a couple of things that we can do. One is to implement HCDA's reserved housing investigative committee report. That's one of it's a report that was produced by the outgoing board. One of the last acts that they did was to accept this report of their own committee and made some recommendations about changing not just HCDA regulations, but other proactive measures that HCDA might be able to do, including advocating for changes in either financing tools and other actions that can support affordable housing in the district. Some of those ideas are not necessarily, wasn't a really thorough study that they did, so some of the ideas haven't been completely vetted, but we are going ahead with looking at our own rules to see what we can do to promote affordable housing in the district. We will be looking at a draft in September, and or at least a report on a draft, not the draft of the rules per se. I mean, this is if there are changes to regulations, we'll go through a fairly long process involving lots of public involvement and comment. So one of the things I think we would certainly look at is to try to make whatever regulations we do adopt compatible with what the city and county of Honolulu adopts, because Kakaako, after all, is part of the city and county of Honolulu. It's not a municipality on its own. We'd also seek land dedication for affordable housing. Right now, and in the past, that wasn't really possible to accept land dedication as a means to satisfy the reserved housing requirement, or accept fee in lieu payment for affordable housing or for reserved housing. But that's something that's a tool that's available to us now. And then to advocate for incentives such as increased funding, light tech funding, other sources of rental housing, trust fund, and partnerships with other agencies. And you'll see the HHFTC here represented because they can be a great partner for developing housing in Kakaako, as Stanford pointed out, which is a very successful Hikaville Place project. Now, the homeless encampment is something that grew in part because there was enforcement of the supply ban in other districts, and Kakaako became kind of a landing spot because there was no enforcement by the city of people living on the streets or living on the sidewalks. So essentially, it was a somewhat anarchic situation in Kakaako and Kai, where that encampment grew larger as people were forced out of other areas and came to settle in Kakaako. HCDA's tools are pretty limited in terms of dealing with homelessness. We're not a social service agency. We don't have the police enforcement powers that municipality has. We can use the sheriff's office to some extent, at least to safeguard the state lands, but not the city streets that are in Kakaako and Makai. So we have to work in partnership with others. One of the things that we can do and did do is to try to draw attention to this issue by inviting the stakeholders to one of our board meetings to explain the kind of conditions that they're dealing with. And then also people who are providing services to homeless individuals to see what they can bring to help solve this problem. As Lindsay mentioned, the governor has formed a leadership team, which is actually the proper way to do it because it brings together the city and state resources and agencies to do a coordinated approach. It's a very complex problem. When we're speaking of the homeless population, it's not just one set of people. There are a lot of different people with different types of needs. But what we have out there at present in this kind of uncontrolled situation is a behavioral sink. The strong are preying on the weak. We have a public sanitation issue. We have a growing crime rate. So something really needs to be done. It needs to be done soon. So HCDA is, as Lindsay pointed out, trying to cooperate in whatever way we can to provide resources that are under our jurisdiction to help solve that problem, both in the short term. Now, what the state is looking for are temporary shelters in the Kakaako area. They're not meant to be permanent housing solutions. The reason why we would put affordable housing above homeless encampment, in a sense, is that to solve the homeless problem, we have to develop more affordable housing. And I think you've read about other things that the leadership team is looking at, which includes renovating, rehabilitating available public housing units to provide a longer-term shelter for people who are presently homeless. Parks and shoreline. This is the 2011 conceptual Makai master plan that embraced not just the Kakaako Waterfront Park, but also the Kewalo Basin. It's a bubble diagram, essentially. It's not meant to be looked at in great specificity, but it provides the guide for what is essentially expresses a layer of green concept along the shoreline. So where you don't have shorefront actually developed as a park, There is a promenade or continuous access around the shoreline for the public, for public use. Some of that promenade will have commercial uses that are related to the waterfront because Kewala Basin is a working commercial harbor. And the question is, to what degree do we want to have commercial uses, or what kind of commercial uses that are really supportive of public use of that waterfront area? That's one of the things that we're considering now in the request for proposals for 3 of the lots that are fronting Kewala Basin. One of the things that we do have to look at quite squarely is the cost of maintaining this area. The city and county of Honolulu does not accept Kakaako Waterfront Park for dedication, which means that the funds for maintaining the park have to come out of HCDA funds. HCDA's main source of revenue is for the leasing of public lands. So it puts us in kind of a conflict of interest in a sense, because we have public lands that may be offered for revenue-producing uses, but at the same time, we can't really cut back on what we had already planned as park space. We can't sacrifice what had been planned park space for commercial uses. Eventually, we're going to have to find a way to convince the city to take over the maintenance of that park. I mentioned industrial services and small businesses. This is an easily overlooked area of Central Kakaako. People take it for granted, these businesses, but this is a very densely packed area with lots of jobs, lots of revenue-producing businesses. They've been there for years. Many of them are family-owned businesses. I worked with a project to identify exactly what the economic activity was here, and at that time, this was 2007, I believe, the annual revenue from that district, that small district, was about over $58 million, and there were hundreds of jobs located in Central Kakaako. And more important in some ways is the type of services provided, because downtown Honolulu, Waikiki, Ala area, all of those commercial areas and high-density residential areas depend on services located in Central Kakaako. It's the easternmost industrial district in urban Honolulu, or in fact in Oahu. The nearest, as go east, the nearest industrial district beyond that is Kailua, past Makapu'u Point. So it's strategically located. It's an area where we do need to have industrial service businesses in this location because of its importance to other districts. There's a bill actually at the City Council, Bill 61. If you're not aware of it, I hope you will be aware of it, because one of the comments that we got from the businesses, many of the business owners in Central Kakaako, is the rising real property tax assessments. That's actually driving a lot of the businesses to close because they can't afford those spaces anymore because of real property taxes. The increases were running 20% per year for these industrial services businesses, so they're getting squeezed out. The bill at City Council is actually, I understand, it's just some comment that I happened to make in a newspaper interview about how other cities have provided tax incentives for industrial businesses to remain in areas that are under a lot of economic pressure from real estate development around them. So the bill would essentially provide a means for reducing real property taxes in exchange for dedicating that property for industrial service use for a set period of years. If they take it out of that industrial service use, there's a rollback tax. It's similar to the agricultural dedication tax that we already have in place. There's also another bill, there's another ordinance in the city that where you can get a property tax reduction for commercial districts where there is an historic building. If the historic building is dedicated for that purpose. Over the long term, another thing that Central Kakaako, another issue it faces is the street standards, and in fact that they're mostly private streets. And that's a big controversy now because many of the streets are, or many of the businesses are being charged for parking along streets where they never really had to pay for parking for their customers. So a good model to look at, I think, is Granville Island in Vancouver, British Columbia, where they have an industrial district that has been converted to multi-use very successfully. They actually have a cement plant there, a marina repair place, they have all kinds of artisan shops and the rest. They have street standards that are modified to suit the context. They have used bollards, I think you mentioned in your used bollards and planters and to separate pedestrian traffic from cars. You could not do this under city standards, but you can if you maintain streets as private, held as a trust. In Vancouver, all the streets are designed, managed, maintained by a trust held by the property owners in combination with the city of Vancouver. So they don't have to meet the Vancouver City street standards, but it works beautifully. If you've been to Granville Island, you see people walking around, mixing with these big cement trucks that come by, and nobody gets hurt. Amazingly. Anyway, we have to think creatively about these kinds of solutions and not just be slaves to particular standards that have been conventionally accepted by the county government. So finally, HCDA operations. Well, no agency lasts forever, and I don't think, particularly looking at HCDA's original purpose, which was to promote the redevelopment of a particular district, we're going to get to the point where that's been accomplished. I mean, cities are always evolving. There'll always be changes in Kakaako. Even if after HCDA leaves the scene, there'll be further changes. I mean, that's just the nature of things, the way cities develop over a period of time. But it may be unusual to say, usually agencies don't advocate dissolving themselves, but I think maybe time will come, and perhaps relatively soon, where we really have to look at that. Make Kakaako reintegrated with the city and county of Honolulu, rather than perpetuate this agency just for the sake of continuing it. So I think we need to start looking at that. The other thing is that we have the two major landowners in the district have these master plans that are vested, where the development rights are vested. Well, if we have a TOD overlay, the TOD overlay will have a different set of regulations. So we have to figure out a way, if either of those two landowners want to avail themselves of certain incentives of the TOD overlay, how does that relate to their vested master plans? We really need to think about how to modify those master plans in a way that makes it a compatible part of the TOD as well. And those are my thoughts to leave you with.
John, Lindsay, and Stanford, thank you very much for your time today. But mostly to all of you for taking time out to come and visit with us. Our speakers will be around for a few minutes if you have any specific questions. Otherwise, please, 99 for $99. So sign up. We want to drink wine with you and get to know you a little better. So aloha, have a great afternoon.